10 years. That's how long it took. Not 10 years of waiting, but of grinding, saving, saying no when I wanted to say yes. I skipped vacations, turned down brunches, and worked double shifts when others were sleeping in on Sundays. I clipped coupons so religiously the cashier at Safeway started keeping the Sunday inserts for me. While my friends posted photos of girls' weekends and new kitchen remodels, I was paying off student loans and stashing every spare dollar into a high-interest savings account. People think sacrifice looks noble, but most of the time it looks quiet. It looks like eating oatmeal for dinner while paying rent on time. It looks like skipping drinks at happy hour so you can afford new tires. It looks like sitting at your desk while everyone else is home with their families because you need that bonus more than you need rest. Fresno isn't flashy, but the house I found? It felt right. A modest stucco 3-bedroom with a little porch and citrus trees in the backyard. There was a bay window in what would be my reading room. A kitchen with dated tile, but solid bones. The kind of place that says, "You've earned peace." I didn't tell my family. Not because I was hiding it, because I knew better. My family doesn't celebrate you. They repurpose you. I'd learned that the hard way. No one knew I was closing the deal in a week, I told myself as I stood outside the house during my first official walkthrough with Tanya, my realtor. Not even my family. Tanya unlocked the door with a casual flick of her wrist, and I stepped inside, already imagining furniture placements and curtain options. The air smelled of dust and possibility. "Cozy," she said, glancing around. "Good bones." I nodded, running my hand over the rough edge of the counter. "It's mine." That's when I made the mistake. I invited my sister to see it. "Just for fun," I'd said. "Come check out what I'm about to buy." Barbara showed up with an iced coffee in one hand and her phone in the other. She walked in like she already lived there. Her eyes scanned the room with the confidence of someone selecting curtains, not complimenting someone else's milestone. "This would be great for the kids," she said, motioning to the second bedroom. I raised an eyebrow. "The kids?" She laughed. "No, I mean, just saying. If it were mine—" Tanya looked up from her clipboard, hesitant. Barbara wandered into the master, pulled out her phone, and started taking photos. "Wow, this gets a lot of light. Perfect for a nursery." I forced a smile, trying to shove down the flicker of discomfort curling in my stomach. "Just out of curiosity," Barbara added, "who's the lender? What kind of rate did you lock in?" Tanya shifted on her feet. Before we left, Barbara asked for Tanya's business card. "You never know," she said with a grin. That night, I replayed it all. The measuring, the offhand comments, the way she looked at Tanya, not like she was happy for me, but like she was staking a claim. That day should have felt like home, I wrote in my journal. But instead, I felt like a guest. Back at work, I didn't tell a soul. I'd learned early that joy is fragile around certain people, especially family. They don't pop your balloon. They let it drift just enough for you to watch it float out of reach. When I was promoted last year, my parents didn't say congratulations. They asked if I could help Barbara with her car note. When I turned 30, Barbara got a baby shower, and I got a Venmo transfer with no message. At my desk, I received a text from Tanya. "Loans pre-approved, all signs green." I let myself smile, small, careful. This was mine. Quietly, powerfully, finally mine. 2 days later, my phone buzzed with an unknown number. "Hi, Reet," Tanya said, voice tight. "I didn't want to alarm you, but your sister came back." She said she needed another look. Alone. I froze. "Barbara?" "She told the front office she was your financial partner." My breath caught. I asked for ID. She didn't have it, then left quickly. But she lingered. She looked in windows. It didn't feel right. I hung up and sat in silence, letting the implications settle like dust. Barbara hadn't said a word. No text. No, "Hey, I stopped by again." My mind rewound to the way she'd touched the walls, how she took measurements. This wasn't curiosity. It was reconnaissance. I wanted to believe I was overreacting, that I was just being protective, maybe even jealous. But the pit in my stomach wasn't new. It was familiar. When we were kids, Barbara got the first pick of everything, the best room, the nicest gifts. When she cried, I was told to give her what she wanted. When I cried, I was told to stop being difficult. Be flexible. Let it go. She's got more on her plate. My whole life, being the bigger person meant shrinking to fit someone else's narrative. I opened an old notebook where I wrote quotes to steady myself. When someone shows you who they are, believe them the first time. Maya Angelou. This wasn't jealousy. It was intuition finally refusing to be ignored. I came home late that evening, and as I turned the corner onto my street, I stopped my car halfway down the block. Barbara's SUV was parked right in front of my almost home. I leaned forward, heart thudding. She was standing by the mailbox, gesturing animatedly at the house. Beside her, my father. He nodded, hands in his pockets like he was discussing landscaping. My hands clenched around the steering wheel. I didn't pull into the driveway. I didn't get out. I just sat there, watching the two of them act like it was theirs. That night, I didn't sleep. The house I'd saved for wasn't just in danger. It was already slipping from my hands. The voicemail came early, before the sun had even fully warmed the blinds in my apartment. Tanya's voice was steady, but there was a thin layer of concern threaded through every syllable. Hey, Reet? Quick question. Did you sign something I don't know about? Something labeled Family Co-Ownership Addendum? I blinked hard, still sitting cross-legged on the couch with my second cup of coffee. My heart didn't race. It paused, just long enough for me to realize it wasn't confusion I was feeling. It was dread. I opened my laptop, fingers suddenly leaden. There it was, sitting in my inbox like a wolf dressed in linen. Contract addendum, family co-ownership. It even had an e-signature. My name, my initials, time-stamped 2 nights ago. But it wasn't mine. I didn't need to compare strokes or angles. I knew my hand, and this wasn't it. Someone had signed for me. Someone thought I wouldn't notice, or worse, wouldn't fight back. I called Tanya immediately. Please tell me this is some clerical mistake, I said, my voice steadier than my pulse. She exhaled. I was hoping it was. But, Reet, your sister and your dad came in last week. They said you all decided to purchase jointly. They were persuasive. Persuasive? They had a printed layout, said it was a shared family plan, and you'd emailed your consent. I flagged it with legal, but when the e-signature came through, our team cleared it. And you didn't think to call me then? I asked, sharper than intended. I should have. I hesitated. I'm sorry. I didn't yell. I thanked her for the call, hung up, and opened a new folder on my desktop. I named it Documentation, just in case. Then I started saving every email, screenshotting every message, and recording a voice memo summarizing what just happened. I wasn't going to scream. I was going to build a case. That evening, my mother insisted I come over for dinner. Just a casual meal, she said, as if she hadn't known exactly what was unfolding behind my back. Barbara greeted me like we were sorority sisters. She wore that familiar lipstick, the kind that pretends to be subtle but always stains everything it touches. Halfway through reheated lasagna, she smiled sweetly and said, When we move in, I'll paint that ugly yellow room first. Maybe sage green? I put my fork down. We? Dad chuckled without looking up. I already told Tanya the 3-bedroom layout's perfect for the kids. Jack wants bunk beds. I stared at him, letting the silence speak louder than I ever had. They didn't flinch. I remembered something I'd read once. Passive aggression is still aggression, just with a prettier plate. I looked around the table. Barbara dished seconds for her son like she'd been running the kitchen for years. My mother dabbed her mouth like none of it was happening. The only person missing from the conversation was me. After dinner, I didn't go home. I sat in my car outside the house that was supposed to be my sanctuary. I stared at it for over an hour, watching the porch light flicker on. No one was inside, but it didn't feel empty. It felt hijacked, as if every memory I'd imagined in those rooms had already been overwritten with someone else's storyline. Why is my name the one on the mortgage, I thought, but theirs on every room? I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I replayed every conversation, every innocent suggestion Barbara had made over the past 2 weeks. Every compliment now sounded like a blueprint. I gripped the steering wheel and whispered to myself, they don't know who they're dealing with. And I meant it. The email came the next morning. Subject line: Family home layout, final draft. Barbara had accidentally CC'd me, or maybe she'd assumed I'd just smile and go along with it. The PDF was neatly formatted, color-coded with decorative fonts. Jack plus Ellie's room. Barbara's studio. Guest room for Mom. I scanned the document 3 times. There was no REIT. Not a single space marked mine. I scrolled further. Priority list. Backyard swing set, baby gate installation, garage conversion for storage. They hadn't just assumed I'd agree, they'd already moved in. On paper. I sat at my desk, fingers numb. My hands hovered over the keyboard, unsure whether to respond, scream, or laugh. Instead, I forwarded it to my documentation folder and said aloud, they've made this easy. That night, as if to tie a neat bow on the betrayal, my father texted me. We've taken care of the hard stuff for you. Now you just need to sign the papers and we'll handle the rest. So calm, so polished, so full of paternal poison dressed as care. I didn't reply. I pulled out the same notebook I'd kept since college, half journal, half survival guide. I flipped to the next blank page, wrote the date. Then one line beneath it. This is when the war began. I arrived 15 minutes early, not because I was worried, but because I had earned this moment and I wasn't about to let it pass by unnoticed. The folder in my hand held every financial record, every correspondence, every piece of proof that this house was mine. My blazer was crisp, my slacks pressed, and my shoes didn't make a sound on the marble tile of the title office lobby. I wanted the moment to be clean, professional, powerful. Tanya met me with a hesitant smile. You look sharp, she said, voice slightly thinner than usual. Thanks, I replied, scanning her face for the hesitation I didn't want to acknowledge. Let's just get through it. She nodded. Her eyes didn't quite meet mine. I didn't press. I wouldn't let a flicker of discomfort take this from me. It took 10 years to get here. I wouldn't let a look ruin it. Inside the meeting room, the conference table gleamed under the overhead lighting. Tanya slid a folder toward me. There's something we need to review before we proceed, she said softly. I opened the folder. It took less than a minute for the blood to drain from my face. Your father submitted a change request, she continued, careful with her words. The deed's been moved under the Olanek family trust. He's listed as the trustee. My name was still there, but buried under a layer of bureaucracy I hadn't created, hadn't agreed to, hadn't signed. I'm not dead, I said flatly. Why does this look like a succession document? Tanya sighed. He claimed you gave verbal permission, said you wanted it protected as a family asset. And no one checked with me? We flagged it, she explained, but the notary approved it based on the digital authorization and the attached email. My stomach turned. I didn't need to ask what email. I already knew someone had forged consent in a language that sounded like me, but wasn't mine. My hands trembled just enough to make the paper rattle as I closed the folder. Before I could breathe, the glass door opened. My father walked in first, shoulders squared, face blank like a man stepping into a board meeting he expected to control. Barbara followed, carrying a Starbucks cup with her signature nonchalance and a folder of her own tucked under one arm. Surprise, Dad said, spreading his arms. We thought it'd be nice to wrap this up together, as a family. My throat closed. Barbara held up her cup and pointed to the label. Guest room paint ideas, she read out loud with a grin. We're thinking something coastal, muted blue maybe. I didn't respond. What are you doing here? I asked, my voice low but steady. Dad smiled, as if I'd asked what time the meeting started. To finalize the papers, sweetheart. We're all signing today. Tanya glanced at me, uneasy. I'm not signing anything, I said, louder this time. And neither of you belong on that deed. Barbara stepped back, just a fraction. But Dad, he raised the folder like it was a flag. This isn't just about you, Reet, he said. Barbara's family needs space. You live alone. You've always said you don't like clutter. I stared at him. That's not an invitation to take my house. It's not about taking anything. It's about doing what's right. For the family. This is my name, I said, tapping the document. This is my mortgage. You can't just decide. Dad's voice boomed. You're being ungrateful. This house belongs to your sister's family, not to you. The notary froze mid-note. Tanya didn't breathe. Even Barbara blinked, for once unsure of her footing. I didn't cry. I stood up, and I walked out. Outside, the sun hit hard. The pavement shimmered. My palms were slick and my mouth dry. I could feel my pulse in my ears. I stood in the parking lot, willing myself to focus. My eyes stung, but not from tears. It was the sting of being blindsided, gutted, and expected to smile through it. They hadn't just undermined me. They'd staged a coup, and they'd done it under the pretense of love. They planned this, I murmured. They walked into my dream and claimed it like it was always theirs. Later that night, I couldn't sleep. The apartment felt too quiet, too small. I sat by the window with a cup of tea I'd let go cold, staring out at the glow of distant porch lights. Memories started to surface, not from the past week, but from decades earlier. The time I won second place at the science fair, and no one came to see my display because Barbara's dance recital was that night. The birthday where my dinner was canceled because Barbara's kids needed to sleep early for school. The graduation party that turned into a fundraiser for Barbara's moving costs. Each recollection wasn't an isolated slight. They were dominoes, and now they'd all fallen. You don't realize you've been the outsider, I whispered, until the door slammed shut behind you. This wasn't the first time they took something from me. It was just the first time it had a deed. The message came just before midnight. Dad, you'll thank me later. Barbara's family needs stability. You can live anywhere. It wasn't a plea. It was a final nail. I didn't respond. I walked to the kitchen, printed out the altered contract, and slid it under a magnet on the fridge. I stared at it like a battlefield map. Then I grabbed my notebook, turned to a clean page, and wrote just one sentence. If they want to play legal, I'll show them how the underestimated one fights. I sat in my car outside their house for 22 minutes. I know because I kept checking the clock, thinking if I waited long enough, the dread would shrink into something more manageable. It didn't. The house hadn't changed. Same beige stucco, same uneven pavers on the walkway, but somehow it felt like foreign territory now, like something had shifted and I didn't know the rules anymore. I scrolled up to the last message from my dad. We've taken care of the hard stuff for you. Now you just need to sign the papers and we'll handle the rest. I hadn't replied. I hadn't even walked into the house since the title office disaster. A part of me wanted to believe maybe I misunderstood. Maybe they weren't trying to erase me. Maybe it was all one big miscommunication tangled in assumptions and bad timing. Still, I needed to see it for myself, not to confront, just to observe. I told myself I wasn't there to argue. I was there to listen to what wasn't being said. Dinner was already on the table when I stepped inside. Meatloaf, mashed potatoes, green beans. My mother greeted me with an exaggerated cheeriness that made my skin crawl. There she is. Sit, sit. We waited for you. Barbara's kids were already in their seats, coloring with crayons that had somehow appeared in the drawer that used to hold my mom's sewing kit. Barbara was pouring juice, chatting with Dad about some school volunteer sign-up. At my old spot at the table, there was a plastic plate labeled Jack in messy, crayon-scrawled letters. I sat across from it. The dinner was like a play that everyone had rehearsed but me. Every line felt rehearsed, every smile a little too tight. When Jack knocked over his juice, Barbara didn't flinch. It's okay, honey. We'll have our own space soon. You won't have to share with Aunt Reet. I didn't respond, but my fingers gripped the edge of the table until my knuckles went white. Oh, Mom chimed in, passing the potatoes. Your sister's really looking forward to the blue room. It's so bright in the mornings, perfect for the kids. I looked down at my plate. I hadn't served myself yet. It was choreographed. All of it. That night, back at my apartment, I opened my email out of habit. I almost missed it. A forwarded message from Tanya. The subject line read, "Final layout, cottage move-in." The PDF attachment opened with a splash page featuring a floor plan. Every room was labeled in bubbly handwriting. Jack Ellie's room, Barbara's office, guest suite for mom, pantry upgrade suggestions, garage conversion, storage plus mini gym. There was no room marked REIT, not even a shared space. Nothing. I read it twice. Then a third time, the subject line said, "Final." They'd written me out, literally. I stared at the screen, my hands ice cold despite the room's warmth. Then, in a voice I didn't recognize as mine, I whispered, "They've written me out." Silence has always been their weapon of choice. Not screaming, not name-calling, just quiet reshaping of narratives until you realize the world around you no longer includes you. I thought back to every family photo where I stood on the end, barely in the frame. Every holiday when Barbara's name was on everyone's lips and mine never came up unless someone needed help in the kitchen. There's a quote I read once in a dusty paperback from a thrift store. The opposite of love isn't hate, it's indifference. This wasn't betrayal to them. This was logistics, asset distribution, family optimization. I wasn't hurt. I was edited out. By 2 a.m, I'd given up on sleep. I stood barefoot in the kitchen, boiling water for tea I wouldn't drink. The glow of my laptop cast a blue shadow across the counter. I began pulling every email, every forwarded PDF, every photo, and saving them into organized folders. Then I opened a browser and began researching. California property law, trust interference, real estate fraud, coerced transfer of ownership. I recorded a voice memo on my phone. Don't react, just build the record. After taking a screenshot of the floor plan, I attached it to a text message and sent it to Dave, my lawyer friend. My message was short. This was never a gift. This is evidence. The sun hadn't fully risen when I parked outside the house again. The neighborhood was still, except for the faint rustling of sprinklers clicking on down the street. I stepped into the yard, careful not to make noise. I stood by the bay window, the one I'd picked out during my first tour, dreaming about a reading chair and late afternoon sun. Inside the room, leaned casually against the wall, was a baby gate. Unopened, still in its packaging, but already there. They weren't waiting. The room was still there, but it had never been mine. I was folding laundry when it happened. My phone buzzed on the counter, screen lighting up with a preview of a text from the family group chat. That in itself wasn't strange. What stopped me mid-fold was the message. Dawn. Don't tell Reet about the swing set cost, just put it in the final doc. The final doc? I stared at it for a full minute before it registered. The message wasn't meant for me. They'd added me to the wrong group thread, probably by accident. I waited, wondering if someone would notice and delete it. No one did. Not even Barbara, who responded seconds later with a thumbs-up emoji. They were planning around me, without me. About something I had built. It wasn't silence anymore. It was exclusion, with intention. I dialed my father's number without rehearsing anything. He answered on the second ring, cheerful like he'd been expecting my call. "Hey there, sweetheart. Everything okay? Why are you discussing my house without me?" My tone wasn't angry, just stripped of all pretense. There was a pause. Then, in that condescending warmth he'd perfected over decades, he said, "You should be proud to help your family. You're not using all that space, Reet." "It's not a barn. It's my home." I know, but Barbara's kids need room to grow. You'll understand one day when you have kids." The implication landed sharp. Like always, he assumed I'd never fully understand life because I wasn't a wife or a mother. "I'm going to ask you one last time. Stop making decisions that involve my name without speaking to me." "We're just trying to avoid conflict," he said. "Let's not escalate this." I hit record on my phone. "Then stop pretending this is collaborative." "This attitude," he said quietly, "is why Barbara didn't want to involve you earlier." That was it. "I'm done letting you speak for me," I said, voice cold and even. You don't get to use my silence as permission. Then I hung up. The email from Tanya arrived that afternoon. Subject: forwarded email. Barbara, accidental CC. No greeting, no fluff, just an attachment labeled Move-in Plan, Reed's Place. I opened it and my stomach dropped. It wasn't just notes, it was a full relocation strategy, a move-in timeline, color-coded assignments, Barbara's to-do list, Jack's bunk bed delivery, Ellie's daycare transfer, room reassignments, Jack Ellie, West bedroom, Barbara, studio office, Mom, guest suite, garage, convert to toy storage pantry overflow. Then the sentence that changed everything. She won't resist once we're already inside. She folds under pressure. Another comment in the chain. Is this legal? Barbara's reply. She doesn't want drama. I sat back in my chair, hand over my mouth. They weren't just assuming anymore. They were organizing, weaponizing my reluctance to cause waves, counting on my silence. Manipulating the fact that I never raised my voice, so I must not care, but I did care, and now I had proof. Later that night, I made a list, a real one, not a mental tally or a journal entry. Step 1, hire Dave. Step 2, change the locks. Step 3, draft property control order. Step 4, screenshot everything. Step 5, tell no one until it's done. I added a quote to the top of the page, something I'd read years ago from Ruth Bader Ginsburg. You can disagree without being disagreeable. I had spent my entire life choosing quiet. This time, I would choose correct. I called Dave the next morning. He answered on the first ring. I was hoping you'd call. What's going on? I need legal protection for a property I haven't even moved into yet. He didn't laugh. I explained everything. The forged email, the move-in plan, the text thread. I forwarded the documents while we spoke. He scanned as we talked. This is civil manipulation, he said slowly, bordering on coercion. Possibly fraud if we find anything else tied to financial misrepresentation. You think I have a case? Reet, he said. They're constructing a legal fiction without you. That's actionable. I exhaled for the first time in hours. Good, I replied. Let's start. That evening, as I boiled water for tea, my phone buzzed again. This time, it was Barbara. She'd sent a photo to the family group chat, a cheerful snapshot of Jack and Ellie standing on the front lawn of my house. Behind them, their toys were scattered. Barbara stood to the side with a big smile, holding a set of house keys. The caption read, "So grateful for this new chapter. Family means everything." I didn't respond. I zoomed in on the image. The lockbox was still on the front door. They hadn't moved in yet, but they wanted the world to believe they had. I stared at that photo for a long time, not angry, focused. Then I sent a message to Dave. They think I'm done. Let's show them I'm not. 2 days after Dave and I met at that small coffee shop near the courthouse, the cease and desist letters were finalized. They were worded clean, sharp, and direct, just like Dave had promised. The letters named both Barbara and my father as individuals involved in unauthorized use of my property, and clearly outlined legal consequences if they continued to engage in any further activity around the house. It's not just a legal warning, Dave said as I reviewed the draft. It's a line in the sand. You're not asking, you're asserting. I signed the letter with my full name, no flourish, just ink and resolve. Then we drove together to the post office. I watched the clerk weigh the envelope, affix the certified tracking label, and slide it into the outbox like a message in a bottle. Something about seeing it physically leave my hands made my pulse settle. That afternoon, I called a locksmith and scheduled a full rekey of the front door and all interior locks. I didn't feel triumphant, just ready. The emotional sting had faded into a quiet kind of vigilance. I wasn't reacting anymore. I was moving. I stayed off Facebook the next day. No doom scrolling. No quiet stalking of family members I should have unfriended years ago. I focused on making a real dinner. Grilled salmon, brown rice, and roasted carrots. I opened the windows, let the breeze move through the kitchen, and put on a playlist that didn't remind me of anyone but myself. The apartment felt like it belonged to me again. I folded laundry without imagining someone else's clothes in my closet. I even laughed at a cooking video. Then my phone buzzed. "Have you seen what Barbara posted?" The message read. It was from Lauren, a coworker who didn't usually text outside of work hours. I hesitated, then opened the app. There it was, a long post from Barbara. 3 smiling photos, one of her and the kids standing on my lawn, another of Jack holding a new home balloon, and one of Barbara with her arms around my mom and dad in front of the front door. The caption read, "Sometimes family forgets what really matters. Luckily, we remember love, unity, and a home for the children. Grateful for a new chapter." The comments were immediate and syrupy. "You're such a great mom. Those kids are lucky to have you. Glad your family supports what's right." Not a single mention of me, of the truth. I didn't cry. I opened my notes app and started documenting. Tanya called that night. I answered on the first ring. "I saw Barbara's post," she said, no small talk. "I just want you to know, I never signed off on anything with her. Not legally, not verbally." "I appreciate you saying that," I replied, exhausted but grateful. "She told the front desk last week she was there to finalize a family plan. Said you'd backed it." "I knew something was off, but she's charming. Too charming." "She's been planning this for months," I muttered. There was a pause. Then Tanya said quietly, "I used to let people take my space too. It starts small, parking in your spot, using your things without asking, acting like their presence is permission. Don't let them finish writing you out." I felt something catch in my throat. "You've been the only one to treat this like it matters," I said. "It does," she replied. "I'll testify if you need me to." For the first time in weeks, I didn't feel like I was losing. I felt seen. The next morning, I received a thick envelope in the mail, one of those stiff, expensive kinds that people use when they want to sound respectful while being anything but. The return address was my parents'. No handwriting, just a printed label. I opened it slowly. Inside was a letter addressed to me, typed and signed at the bottom, by my father only. "Reet, we are writing to express our concern about your recent tone and behavior regarding the house. Your actions have created discomfort and tension among family members. This is not the environment we hope to foster. We urge you to reconsider your approach and come to the table with the grace and willingness we know you possess. Family matters are best solved within the family, not through threats or paperwork. Let us move forward in unity." Dad. No apology. No acknowledgement of wrongdoing. Just a polite attempt to reframe the narrative, to make me the problem. Even when they're wrong, they think they're right if they say it politely. That evening, the locksmith arrived in an unmarked van. I offered him water, let him do his work, and watched as each screw fell into place like armor being fitted. He changed every lock, front door, side entrance, garage. Then I handed him a new deadbolt for the interior hallway door. I climbed the step stool myself to install the new security camera above the front door. It clicked into place like punctuation at the end of a sentence. Then I took out my phone and deleted the family group chat. I didn't announce it, I just erased it. I texted Tanya later. "Thanks for standing by me. You're the only reason I haven't drowned in all this." She replied within minutes, "You're not drowning. You're finally swimming where they can't reach." The next morning, I woke to an unexpected knock. I checked the camera feed. 3 people stood outside, 2 older women I recognized from my parents' church, and a man in a pressed button-down holding a Bible. One of the women was holding a pie. I didn't open the door. Instead, I turned on the audio. "Your mother asked us to check on you," the man said gently. "She's worried. We thought we'd stop by and see if you needed anything." I stared at the screen. The pie was placed on the doorstep like a peace offering wrapped in sugar. I watched until they walked away. Then I saved the video clip, forwarded it to Dave, and texted, "If they want a war of appearances, they just declared it." Friday morning began like most others, until I was pulled into HR. I was barely 2 sips into my coffee when Jamie from compliance knocked on my cubicle wall and asked if I had a moment. I followed her down the hallway with that quiet dread that only builds when someone says, "It's probably nothing." She closed the door behind us. The blinds were half closed, casting horizontal stripes across the table between us. She gestured for me to sit. "There's been a call," she said, folding her hands on the desk. "From your father. He expressed concern over your well-being, mentioned some emotional distress due to family circumstances. He said he thought it might be affecting your work." I stared at her, deadpan. "Did he say anything specific?" Jamie shook her head. "Just vague things about a stressful housing issue and strained family dynamics. He positioned it as a wellness concern." I smiled, but it didn't reach my eyes. "Right. Thank you for letting me know." She looked relieved that I wasn't defensive. "We're not making any assumptions, but if there's anything you need, I'm good," I said, rising. "Truly, but thank you." As soon as I was out of the room, I texted Dave and Tanya. They just went professional. My dad called HR. Back at my desk, I didn't even pretend to work. I called Dave, stepped outside, and laid it all out. "We're escalating," he said calmly. "Defamation, professional interference. I'll draft a new letter tonight." "Make it airtight," I told him. "You're playing chess. They're playing charades," he replied. Then I emailed Jamie and asked her to confirm the details of our meeting in writing, not because I didn't trust her, but because I knew better now than to let anything live only in memory. That afternoon, I submitted PTO for the next week. I didn't give a reason. I just needed time to turn this into a structured defense. No more scattered screenshots and whispered outrage. That night, I opened a new journal. The first page read, "This isn't personal revenge, it's personal preservation." Saturday morning, I drove to my parents' house under the guise of picking up a box of books. I hadn't been there since the title office meltdown. The moment I stepped in, I smelled cinnamon and betrayal. Ellie ran up first. "Aunt Reet," she chirped, throwing her arms around my waist. She was too young to know how sharp words could be, but old enough to repeat them. "Mom said your room is going to be our playroom," she announced proudly. I froze. "My room." Barbara entered from the hallway, trying too hard to look surprised. "Ellie," she laughed nervously, "you're not supposed to say that." I crouched beside Ellie and smiled. "I hope you get the space you need, sweetheart." Barbara watched me cautiously. I said nothing more, grabbed the box, and left. As I drove off, my hands steady on the wheel, I told myself, I wasn't mad at Ellie. I was mad at myself for still thinking I lived in this story. That evening, a group text came from my mom. "Sunday dinner, family only. Let's talk it out like adults." No apology. No acknowledgement. Just a summons. I thought about all the times my chair was replaced by a high chair or a diaper bag. About how my presence was always negotiable, always secondary. "No more tables where I'm the meal," I whispered, deleting the message. Instead, I opened my laptop. I pulled up every document, every manipulated email, every social media post. I screenshotted Barbara's faux gratitude captions, my father's thinly veiled lectures. I compiled everything into a drive folder labeled Reet's Truth. Then I started writing. Not a rant, a statement, factual, composed, and human. Dave reviewed it, suggesting subtle tweaks. "Make it legal proof," he said. "But keep your voice." I used a quote from Brené Brown to guide the tone. "Clear is kind, unclear is unkind." The post wouldn't go live until Sunday night, but I prepared the photo in advance. A picture of me standing in front of the house with one sentence overlaid. "You don't get to rename what you didn't build." I planned to check on the house Saturday morning. The locksmith had mentioned needing to return for a final adjustment. I arrived around 9:15. As I turned the corner, I saw Mark's truck in the driveway, tailgate down, boxes inside, not just one or two, 4, labeled in bold marker. Ellie's room, kitchen spices, guest towels, Barbara's clothes, master closet. I parked a block away, walked up the sidewalk like I was approaching a crime scene. The front door was cracked open. From the porch, I could hear laughter, Barbara's voice, then Mark's. I didn't hesitate. I stepped back, pulled out my phone, and dialed 911. "Fresno Police Department, what's your emergency?" "I'd like to report an attempted unlawful entry into my home," I said clearly. "The individuals are family, but they were not invited and have no legal authority to be there." "Are they inside now?" "Yes. They've started moving things in." I have legal ownership and documentation on hand. Officers are en route. I hung up and waited by the sidewalk, watching the front door like it might come alive. They thought I wouldn't do it. They thought I'd let it happen. They'd cross the line. Now I was drawing mine. By the time the officers arrived, Barbara had stopped pretending. Mark stood on the porch, arms crossed, eyes darting between the patrol car and the open tailgate of his truck. Barbara's face was flushed, not from shame. She didn't seem capable of that, but from the audacity of being interrupted. A few boxes sat stacked by the entryway, and I could hear the kids' voices from inside, laughing, playing. The officer approached calmly, a hand resting lightly on his belt. "Ma'am, are you the property owner?" I handed him a copy of the deed, already updated with my name, mine alone, thanks to Tanya filing the revision after the forged signature debacle. Yes, the locks were changed this week. They were never authorized to enter. He skimmed the document, nodded once, then turned to Barbara and Mark. "Unless you're on this deed, you need to vacate immediately." Barbara's mouth opened and closed. Mark muttered something under his breath, too low for me to catch, but his posture changed, defensive, like a boxer waiting for a bell that never rang. "They're trespassing," I said, not as accusation, but as fact. Mark stomped down the porch stairs, brushing past the officer without a word. Barbara gathered the kids, who looked confused, not scared. I didn't speak to them. I didn't speak to her. When the door closed behind them, I turned the lock slowly. And then I turned around and walked through every room. It was mine again. That evening, I sat at my desk and uploaded everything: the emails, the floor plan, the cease and desist, the footage from the security camera. Then I opened Facebook and wrote a post. No venom, no dramatics, just truth. I attached screenshots and dates, and I wrote, "This is what happens when people mistake silence for surrender." Within an hour, comments flooded in. Some were cautious. Others were furious on my behalf. "You deserve better. This is disgusting. How did they think they'd get away with this?" Then came the private messages. One from a cousin I hadn't spoken to in years. "We always knew they favored Barbara. We just didn't know it was this bad." I didn't respond. Not because I was bitter, but because I didn't need allies. I needed air. Barbara, of course, responded indirectly. A new post surfaced, a photo of Jack and Ellie holding a hand-drawn sign that read, "We just want peace." The caption, "Children should never pay for adult grudges." I didn't flinch. I didn't answer. The truth makes noise on its own. Sunday morning arrived in a hush. I opened the front door to find a courier standing on the stoop. He handed me a cream envelope with a legal seal. Inside was a copy of the official trespass warning, signed and notarized, sent to both Barbara and my father. Dave had filed it. Efficient, precise. I packed the envelope into my purse, changed into a dark blouse and slacks, and drove to my parents' house for the family dinner I hadn't RSVP'd to, but had every intention of attending. The table was set like a stage: roast chicken, mashed potatoes, cloth napkins, too much food for too few people. My parents sat at one end, Barbara and her children near the center. The cousins were scattered around like extras. The tension was baked into every smile. My father opened with a sigh. "Let's put this behind us, Reet." I reached into my bag, pulled out the envelope, and slid it across the table. "This isn't behind me," I said. "It's been following me since childhood." Barbara opened her mouth. I raised my hand slightly. "I'm not here to debate. I'm here to correct the record." She folded her arms. My mother stared down at her plate. For the first time in my life, I didn't edit my words for their comfort. "I've stayed quiet," I began, because I thought it was the kinder thing, but silence only protected the wrong people. I recounted the timeline, the forged documents, the public manipulation, the backdoor plans. I spoke without tremor, without heat. "You didn't just try to take a house," I said, voice firm. "You tried to write me out of my own life." Aunt Marla, who rarely spoke unless asked, muttered, "I didn't know." Cousin Julia dabbed her eyes with a napkin. My father leaned forward, attempting a tone that once would have made me shrink. "You're tearing this family apart," he said. I met his gaze. "No, I'm refusing to keep holding the pieces together." Then I placed my napkin gently on the table and stood. The room remained frozen, as if my motion disrupted gravity. I walked toward the door, slow, deliberate. Behind me, I heard Mike, one of the few cousins I still trusted, rise from his chair. He caught up to me at the driveway. "You weren't wrong," he said softly. I nodded, keys already in hand. I didn't turn back. The door closed behind me with a sound that wasn't angry, but final. That night, Tanya left me a voicemail. "You need to hear this," she said, her voice low. "Barbara tried calling the mortgage company again this morning. Claimed she had your verbal approval to transfer ownership. I recorded the call." I sat at my desk, lights off, phone speaker echoing Tanya's words. It wasn't just a betrayal, it was attempted fraud. "This is enough to sue," Tanya whispered. "It's also enough to scare them quiet." I opened my laptop, clicked on the folder marked Legal. Then I started drafting the complaint. They played their last card. I'm writing the ending now. Monday morning felt different, not lighter, not resolved, but quieter. No buzz of text notifications, no cryptic emojis, just silence. And for the first time, that silence didn't feel like abandonment. It felt like peace. I got out of bed slowly, letting the sun fill my apartment through the east-facing blinds. The floor was cold, grounding. I made coffee without checking my phone, and as I sat at the table, I realized something. I wasn't waiting anymore. Not for apologies, not for validation. I had told the truth, and whether anyone liked it or not, I had reclaimed the space they tried to erase me from. There's a strange kind of peace in knowing I've been honest. I wasn't triumphant, just grounded. Still, it didn't last long. By midday, messages started trickling in. Not from family, from strangers, from women I'd seen once at church potlucks or heard mentioned in passing. "Praying for your heart, Reet. God works on all sides." Another, "Don't let anger blind you to grace. Family is still family." I screenshot everyone and saved them into my evidence folder. Later, someone forwarded me a photo taken at a church luncheon that Sunday. Barbara had stood up and shared a few words. I read the caption underneath the post. "Pray for Reet. She's lost her way, caught up in bitterness. We're doing our best to love her through it." That's when I stopped breathing for a beat. Not because it hurt, but because the audacity was so deep, it had passed insult and landed somewhere between absurdity and performance art. I sat back in my chair and whispered aloud, "When truth scares people, they call it rebellion." Tuesday, a coworker named Jen tapped on my office door. "Hey, just wanted to give you a heads up. This might be nothing, but I figured you'd want to see." She slid her phone across my desk. The video was titled, "Family Values in Crisis." It opened with soft piano music and a blurred transition into what looked like a homemade testimonial. Barbara, sitting in her living room, talking about trauma and estrangement, faith and forgiveness. Then came the audio. My voice. But not really. It was spliced, chopped and looped, taken from the confrontation at the title office and distorted to make me sound frantic, unhinged. Overlaid text read, "Not all wounds are physical. Sometimes the enemy is within the family." I stared at the screen. Jen said nothing. She didn't have to. I opened my files, pulled up the original recording from my phone, and played the real version. Calm, collected, assertive. Then I sent both files to Dave. He replied within minutes. They just handed us defamation on a platter. Wednesday evening, my phone rang. "Alyssa." I hesitated, then answered. "I just wanted to say," she began, voice quiet. "You weren't crazy." I closed my eyes. That one sentence undid a week's worth of tight-chested mornings. "I was there at the dinner," she continued. "I saw their faces. You weren't cruel. You were brave." I didn't speak at first. My throat was tight in a way that had nothing to do with anger. "Thank you," I said. "Thank you for not letting it be silent." She went on to share stories, things Barbara had said about me in group chats, things my dad had implied. Nothing shocking. But hearing it confirmed that the game wasn't new. It had just gotten louder. "I'm not taking sides," she said. Just tired of pretending truth doesn't matter. That night, I texted Tanya. It's starting. She replied instantly. Good. Let it. Thursday morning, my parents posted a photo on their Facebook page. It was a family gathering, smiles all around, standing on the church steps. The caption read, "Through trials, family remains united in faith." I zoomed in and saw it, an old family photo they had cropped. I wasn't in it. I recognized the original. I remembered where I'd been standing. They had literally cut me out, and I smiled. They're clinging to the image, I thought. I've already moved on from it. That night, I received a message request from someone I hadn't heard from in over 2 decades. Mrs. Carter, my third-grade teacher. The message was short. Your mother showed me your post. I always knew you had a strong mind. Don't let anyone take that from you. I read it 3 times. The tears came fast, not from sadness, but recognition. Someone had seen me, a long time ago, and remembered. I typed back. Thank you for remembering me, the real me. Then I opened my laptop and clicked into my drafts. There, waiting, was a post titled, "The House That Built Me." I moved my cursor to the end, and I began to write. I started Monday by logging onto Dave's legal portal, a quiet click echoing louder than I expected. Uploading my documents and signing off on the complaint didn't feel vindictive. It felt necessary. This isn't about punishment, I reminded myself. It's about protection. Fingers hovered over the submit button as I named individuals: Barbara, Don Olanek, the HOA, the mortgage company. When I finally clicked, the world didn't explode. Instead, my phone buzzed. My first ripple in a pond that had been churning silently. I whispered into the empty room. They wanted silence. They're getting consequences. Wednesday afternoon, my phone rang. Fraud prevention. My bank had flagged suspicious activity. Someone tried to change my mortgage mailing address and alter the beneficiary details. The caller gave my social security number and invoked Family Emergency Authority. Barbara and my father sprang immediately to mind. This wasn't random. I spent the next hour on the phone, documenting everything, then emailed the report to Dave. I leaned back and murmured, they were ready to dismantle my life from every corner. Later that day, something unexpected happened. Dad accidentally sent a group text intended for Barbara and Mom, but I was still in the thread. It read, "Let her scream. When the court date hits, she'll back down like always." I stared at the words, heart racing, not hurt, but clear. I took a moment, then replied directly in the thread. Thank you for confirming motive and pattern. And then I tapped Leave Group for good. I took a deep breath the next morning and called Dave. We need final letters, I said. He nodded and crafted formal notices to Barbara, Dad, the HOA, even the mortgage firm. The tone was terse, exact, emotion substituted with documentation. Impersonation, defamation, attempted fraud, psychological coercion, all detailed in crisp legal language. I reviewed his drafts. I removed any hint of anger. As I signed off, I scribbled on a sticky note. When the facts speak, you don't need to yell. Word started spreading. A neighbor who used to wave politely now paused to ask if I was okay. The HOA president left a voicemail. I'm sorry for sending your father's emails, thought I was just being helpful. Some church friends quietly unfollowed Barbara. The family unity posts vanished. Dad and Mom were silent now. Maybe shame, maybe defeat. I didn't reach out. I let my absence speak. Sometimes silence isn't a surrender, it's your truth standing firm. Midweek, a courier delivered a thick envelope. The seal read, Court Notice. Inside, a formal summons. Property interference hearing. Jurvetson vs. Olanek. I sat at the kitchen table, my breath steady, no tremor, only clarity. I read it aloud, my voice calm, resolute. The words sank in, my claim recognized, my story officially heard. I placed the envelope gently on the counter and said, it was never about the house. It was always about my right to own my story. The courtroom was small, but my presence in it had never felt bigger. That was a week ago. Now, the silence wasn't just absence. It had a shape, a thickness. It filled rooms. It moved when I did. I walked barefoot across the hallway tiles, the coolness grounding me. My fingers grazed the walls, walls I had once painted with my mother. Beige in the hallway, sage green in the kitchen. Her voice used to echo off them like some kind of domestic sermon, instructions, critiques, disguised care. None of that now. The group chat had died quietly after I filed the papers. My phone, once lit up with opinions and half apologies, had dimmed into a steady, loyal stillness. No one was asking how I was doing, no one was pretending to. And that, oddly enough, was peace. Peace didn't storm in like some victorious army. It arrived like this: locked doors, unanswered texts, mornings where I only heard my own breath. It was in the absence of surveillance. The absence of managing everyone's feelings. I made coffee that morning with both hands free, not just physically, but emotionally. I didn't need to text anyone where I was. I didn't need to smooth over what was broken. The smell of the brew, deep and nutty, filled the kitchen while sunlight broke through the blinds in careful lines. I stood there, mug in hand, listening to the hum of the refrigerator and the faint ticking of the clock. This house had stopped echoing. Later that afternoon, I heard the mailbox clink shut. No footsteps on the gravel, no knock. Just silence again. Inside the box was a folded note. I didn't have to open it to know the handwriting, my father's. "You've gone too far, but your mother still wants to talk." That was it. No love, Dad. No signature. Just those words on a lined index card like it was a to-do list. I didn't respond. I scanned the note once, then placed it gently in my legal file folder, next to screenshots, printed emails, and every disjointed apology I had cataloged since the unraveling began. Control often comes dressed as concern. I knew that now. It had taken me years to notice how their approval came at the cost of my own stability. Every choice I made outside their comfort zone had been a betrayal. Every success, an unspoken competition. The old me would have obsessed over that note, would have reread it like scripture, dissected it in therapy, maybe even replied. This me? I tucked it away like I was archiving a lesson I no longer needed to relearn. Love doesn't look like ultimatums. It doesn't come with doorbells rung uninvited or words that sting like open palms. That night, my phone buzzed. It was Alyssa, my cousin, the one who had stayed silent in the group chat but had always hugged me a little longer at reunions. Her message was simple. "Thank you for being brave. You made some of us think harder." I stared at that text for a while, thumbs hovering. Then I typed back, "Thank you for saying that. It means more than you know." Tanya, my neighbor and reluctant life coach, stopped by the next morning with 2 coffees and a raised eyebrow. "You look lighter," she said, handing me the cup. I smiled. "I feel less least." We sat on the porch, watching a neighborhood kid chase his dog. "I started a journal," I told her, "but not for the court, just for me, a kind of proof of self." She nodded. "Smart. Sometimes it helps to keep your own receipts." Inside, I had written things like, "Your boundaries don't require their understanding, only your commitment. You don't owe anyone a story they can cheer for, just a life you can live in." Every page was a patch in a quilt I hadn't realized I was making. As Friday approached, so did the court hearing, but instead of panic, I felt a calm that felt almost suspicious. Dave called the night before. "Let the documents speak," he said. "You don't owe anyone a performance." I laughed. "So no dramatic testimony?" He chuckled. "No curtain calls either." That night, I laid out my outfit like armor. Neutral tones, nothing loud, strong lines, soft fabric. Something that said, "I don't need to shout to be heard." I practiced my answers out loud, not to memorize, but to steady my breath. I wasn't looking to convince, I just needed to be present. Before bed, I opened my journal and wrote, "I've already reclaimed the one thing they tried to keep, myself." Saturday morning came with a chill. I lit a candle in the living room, not for ambiance, but for ritual. One by one, I gathered old birthday cards, ones where my parents had written things like, "So proud of you," in handwriting that now felt like forgery. I tore them in half, then smaller, until they became unreadable. But I kept the ones from friends, Tanya's, Alyssa's, even Dave's joke card last Christmas, the ones signed with truth. I deleted Barbara's number from my phone, unfollowed cousins who had stayed publicly neutral. Neutrality had been just another word for silence. Then, I climbed a step stool and hung a new photo above the mantel. It was me, standing alone in front of this house, smiling, not for anyone else, just me. As I looked at the frame, the corners of my mouth lifted, not in triumph, but in recognition. This house wasn't haunted anymore. It was mine. That evening, just as the sky turned a dusty blue, I heard the mailbox again. I walked out slowly, unsure if I expected anything. Inside was a small brass nameplate. No envelope, no message. Just one word etched into the metal. Jurvetson, my mother's maiden name. I turned it over in my palm. It was cold, sturdy, unexpected. Tanya? Maybe? Alyssa? Possibly. Or maybe it was me. A past version of myself sending a signal forward. I closed the gate gently behind me, nameplate still in hand. The evening air was still, nothing moved. And in that stillness, I knew. I wasn't waiting to be welcomed anymore. I was naming it mine. I woke up before the sun, not because of nerves, but because my body seemed to understand what today was. Finality carries its own alarm clock. I moved through the house in silence, brushing my teeth with methodical ease, pressing my blouse, laying out my blazer, the soft navy one that gave me the feeling of a steel wall. I wore no jewelry, no gloss, just lip balm. I chose the flats I could stand in all day. There was nothing performative about how I dressed. Today was not about appearance, it was about arrival. I looked at myself in the hallway mirror. My own eyes stared back, not looking for approval, not flinching. This wasn't about walking into battle. I wasn't walking in to fight, I was walking in to finish. By 7:30, Tanya had pulled up. She didn't say anything at first, just handed me a travel mug and looked me over like a proud big sister. "You ready to walk like you already won?" she asked. I nodded. "I've already survived more than they'll ever admit." We didn't play music. The drive was quiet, steady. At the courthouse, I walked through the metal detector, clutching my file folder like it was armor. I caught sight of my father and Barbara sitting across the lobby. They didn't look at me. I didn't give them the satisfaction of acknowledgement. I had outgrown the need to be seen by them. The courtroom smelled like old air and wood polish. I took a seat beside Dave, who gave me a brief nod. "You're doing great already," he said without looking at me. The judge entered. Firm steps, even voice. He was known for being fair and fast. I appreciated both. The hearing began. Dave stood first. "Your Honor, we're here because Ms. Jurvetson's financial autonomy was repeatedly violated. This was not a misunderstanding. It was a pattern, fraudulent interference, impersonation in banking systems, and prolonged emotional coercion designed to destabilize her independence." He walked the court through our evidence, bank records, a timeline of unpermitted transactions, screenshots, emails, and the text Barbara had so stupidly sent. "Don't worry, I'm cleaning this up before she finds out." Barbara's lawyer stood, middle-aged man in an overpriced suit who spoke like he was rehearsing for community theater. There was confusion, yes, but at its heart, this was a family issue. Miscommunication. Ms. Jurvetson was never in danger, nor was there malicious intent. Sometimes, in close families, boundaries get blurred. I didn't flinch. The judge leaned forward. "Ms. Jurvetson, what do you want from this court today?" I stood, adjusting nothing. "I want peace and the right to my own future, unedited by people who called it love while stealing my autonomy." His eyes held mine a second longer than expected. Then he nodded. "I'd like to read something," I said. He gave me the floor. I opened my folder, unfolded the page. It was crisp, deliberate. I saved for 10 years. I budgeted every paycheck, said no to dinners out, wore shoes until the soles gave in. I did that to build something no one else could take. But they tried. I paused. My voice didn't shake. They dismissed me as emotional, as dramatic, as ungrateful. But what they really couldn't stand was that I stopped needing them to validate my decisions. They didn't just attempt to take my house. They tried to erase the proof that I had done it without them. Barbara shifted in her seat. I continued. They called it family. But family doesn't hack your accounts. Family doesn't gaslight you while smiling through dinner. I am not a placeholder in this family. I am a whole person. Silence fell like snow. Even Barbara couldn't meet my eyes. The judge took a breath. This court finds in favor of Ms. Jurvetson. I exhaled, but not in relief, more like a release. He continued. A restraining order is granted against Ms. Barbara Reynolds and Mr. Harold Jurvetson from any further interference with Ms. Jurvetson's property, finances, or business. They are also prohibited from using her name in any financial or public documentation. This court acknowledges not just the legality, but the principle behind today's decision. I felt one tear fall. I didn't wipe it away. Dave squeezed my hand under the table. Tanya smiled without moving her lips. It was done. Word spread fast. Quietly, but fast. Within days, I noticed the shift. Aunt Marjorie sent a text. I had no idea it was that serious. I'm sorry. An old church friend emailed, "We're proud of how you handled it." The church bulletin stopped posting sermons about the sacred unity of family. Silence, this time, was an acknowledgement. Alyssa and Tanya invited me over that Friday. There were no speeches, no banners, just wine, warm bread, a fire pit. "I still think you should have taken the house back and turned it into a shelter," Alyssa joked. "Maybe next time," I smirked. A few days later, I walked into my office to find a bouquet, white lilies and eucalyptus. No card, but I knew, my mother. It didn't undo anything, but it said what she couldn't. I sat with that a while. By the following week, I made a decision. I listed the house for sale. It wasn't impulsive. I'd thought about it longer than I admitted. In my journal, I wrote, "This house proved I could choose myself. That was its gift. Now it's time to let it go." I packed slowly. Every object had a story. Some I thanked, some I forgave. The last thing I packed was the nameplate. Jurvetson. It went in my front seat. I moved into a small place by the coast, the kind of place where the windows stay open and the ocean doesn't ask questions. I opened my own consulting firm. Small, intentional, mine. I didn't ask anyone's permission. I didn't announce it. I just built it. One quiet morning, I stood outside my new home. The breeze carried salt and something that smelled like promise. I screwed the nameplate onto the mailbox. Tight, level, permanent. I stepped back and looked at it, not as a remnant of the past, but as proof. Proof that I survived what tried to shrink me. They tried to take what I built, but they underestimated the woman who built it. Now, every step I take, I own it.